great. This evening's agenda. Adrian, do we have any observers in this evening with us, or?
Not yet, no.
Okay, great. Not great. Obviously, we welcome observers, but great, we can get started. So thank you. Welcome to the meeting. We're back online this month. I think the last couple of months we had face-to-face meetings, but I know everyone's terribly busy at the moment. So it seemed like the most convenient way to do it. But obviously, the benefit of doing it online means that Hannah Barter is joining us. I think Hannah, obviously, have been supporting us for a long time now, but I think this is probably the first steering group meeting you've joined. So welcome to the meeting.
Thank you.
What we can do is a couple of the things that Hannah, hopefully you'll contribute to relatively early in the agenda. As we go through the minutes of the last meeting, actually, I think a couple of items turn up. There's also the Faversham mood boards, which is on the agenda as well, but we can bring that forward. Obviously, you're welcome to stay for the whole meeting, but if you have other things to do, it means that hopefully you can participate and then dial off as you see fit. Okay, so any apologies for absence, Adrian?
No apologies, everybody's here now.
Okay, super. Thank you. And are there any declarations of interest for the agenda items listed?
Yeah.
I think perhaps, actually, John, I should, just so there is never a problem over this, remind people that I am a director of the Community Land Trust.
Okay, thank you, Harold. I don't think that is directly on the meeting this evening, but of course, I suppose it does have a relevance.
I think, John, actually, it is going to be an issue when we look at the minutes of the 20th of September.
Okay, great. Well, without further ado, let's have a look at the minutes of the 20th of September. So I know, Harold, you weren't present for that meeting, and there are a few items that I'd like to go through. So if you bear with me a second, I just swap screens. Sorry, apologies, never runs terribly smoothly. There we go. So these are the minutes of the 20th September. A couple of things, actually, obviously, we'll discuss any points arising in them, and then hopefully at the end we can agree them as a accurate record of the last minute. It was an unusual meeting in the sense that we had 3 of our steering group couldn't make it, so hence there's probably a keener interest to discuss it. It was an unusual meeting for us because, as you know, every month the neighbourhood plan steering minutes are presented at Town Council, and ordinarily they are generally for the information of the participants. But this meeting was a little different because we actually had quite a number of recommendations which were brought forward to the following Town Council meeting. So we'll just touch upon those. Like I said, since Hannah's with us, if it's okay with everyone, I'll go to item 5, and then, sorry, oh, hold on a second, there's 2 item 5s. I'll go to item 5A, and then we'll go to item 5. So that's maybe one thing that just needs to change. One of the things that we did discuss at the last meeting, and I hope, Hannah, you can help us with this, is the discussion arose again around the issue of affordable housing. And just to give some context, one to those who weren't there, but also to you, Hannah, it's quite clear, obviously, within the neighbourhood plan, we're being asked to allocate around 200 housing units. Unsurprisingly, the vast majority of the sites that we have identified, which we'll talk about in a bit more detail later, are actually relatively modest in size. And what that means is the Swale emerging plan on the last Reg 19 had some guidance around the number of, or the expectation of around affordable housing number. It's quite clear to us that it's likely that that will only apply to a very small number of our sites. And consequently, we probably need to think more about what affordable housing looks like for the neighbourhood plan, rather than simply relying on the local plan to provide that guidance. I don't know if anyone wants to add to anyone who was there, and then of course we can discuss it further. But I think that's the essence of it.
Pretty good summary to me, John. I'd agree. Yeah.
Oh,
So,
I'd like to comment, John.
yes, please, Harold.
I think that's the most wonderful news. First good news I've had today.
Oh,
Okay, great. So Hannah, I know we had a kind of relatively short email exchange on it, and we have already got, I think, something in the plan around affordable housing, but I don't know if you can kind of guide us at all about how we could necessarily approach this or enhance it.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, John. So at the moment, our specific neighbourhood plan policy on this is emerging policy Fab4 residential development. And so what we've said is the first clause is residential scheme should include a mix of accommodation to meet local housing need. So this way we've left it flexible. We've said in particular the need for smaller accommodation, 1 or 2 bedroom, suitable for first-time buyers or renters, or those seeking to downsize, including accommodation suitable for older people and those with limited mobility. So that's the first point. So that isn't saying affordable homes, that's saying any new residential development. So any of our sites that come forward, we could encourage that mix, as it were. Then we've got the support for self-build and community-led schemes. So let's say a site that we allocate may come forward as a community-led development, something like that, which of course by its nature is going to be affordable. We've got a trigger in there to support those as well. Or similarly, if people club together and buy, I don't know, where there were 20 concrete sectional garages and they want to redevelop that, this would support them to build that sort of development. And then our third clause says specifically, affordable housing provision must be provided as an integral part of housing schemes and be tenure blind. So this means not so much with sites potentially that we're going to allocate, but on the larger sites, they don't get to make a payout and that housing be delivered outside of our neighbourhood area. So it's got to be on site and it's got to be pepper potted throughout the development. And then we've put, if there are planning reasons for affordable housing provision provided separately, this should be provided nearby and within Faversham. So if there was some reason that developer negotiated that it's not within that site, that's when you could guide that money then to maybe back up a community land trust project, or to say there's a site that you would actually like to make that entirely affordable. So you might be able to redirect those monies. And then we've got at least 25% of affordable housing provision should be for first homes, because that new national policies come in. So we've set a threshold there at least 25%.
Okay, so given, Hannah, that it's, and we'll talk about this in more detail later, but it's now probable that our neighbourhood plan will be in place before the new Swell local plan.
Yeah.
Should we, because one thing it's clear we don't do is we don't talk about numbers or percentages. And the other thing we don't talk about what is affordable rent versus affordable for sale. And I just wonder whether, given the opportunity in the absence of guidance from a local plan, we could be more bold and set targets, or is that not appropriate? I'm just not sure if it's the right thing to do. It feels like it is, but I don't know if it is.
Could I just add to your question before, Hannah, if you don't mind, just add to John's question. It's very much on the same point. The problem for me about the use of the word affordable is that it tends to mean the government's 80%. And it ignores the social housing need. Is there anything we can do to clarify our language? Because it's clear from the housing needs survey that we had done that the 80% affordability is not affordable by most people in Faversham, including people in entry-level professional jobs.
So, two-parter then. I feel like it's my specialist subject. Harold, whilst it's still fresh in my mind, your element that you raised there is the first homes. So the government guidance now sets thresholds for those, and the total value that they could ever be set for. I think it goes up to £255,000 for a home, or if it's in London, 400 and something odd. So and that's right. And then let's say I bought one of those, and then when I come to sell it, I could never sell it for more than that. So it keeps that in line. So they remain affordable, as it were, that people can get a mortgage and get onto the property ladders potentially with those. And then of course, it's up to you to comment on the applications. When we talk about the affordable housing provision that a developer is going to make, you could encourage it to be for first-time buyers to get on the market. So it's a discount of 60% off the market value or whatever it is. It's for you to comment at that time. But John, like you're saying, is can we then set the threshold to say 40% of all new housing must be affordable? Now, that is what we call one of the strategic policies in the local plan, and we have to be in conformity with those. So to go against that, you'd have to have a lot of evidence base, and it's not a given that we would get past that with examination at a later stage, because it's one of the basic conditions that we have to be in general conformity with the strategic policies, and that is one of Swell's strategic policies.
Yeah,
it also seems to me that we wouldn't be able to do the things around the basin on that basis, John.
And I think that's the challenge, Harold, because a lot of our sites are so small that actually, and I know people use it as an excuse all the time, but I think there is some truth in it. I think there's a viability issue for brownfield sites. Chris?
So I had written a question down. I said, what's like to be accepted at independent examination, which I think you've answered, Hannah. But you raised a question about local plan. Although the local plan, well, the emerging local plan hopefully will have done regulation 18, possibly 19 at that point. You talk about the local plan. Do you mean what's relevant inside bearing fruits, which had a much lower view of affordable housing than the emerging local plan?
What we have to be in conformity with the adopted local plan, but because the new one is so late stage by that point, we would actually quote the later stage one. But when it comes to the technicalities of it at the point in time, because we're going to be ahead of them, the policies will be against the adopted local plan. So it'll be bearing fruits until the new one comes in, and then that new one will supersede the bearing fruits one.
That's I mean, to be honest, if I'm really honest, I'm disappointed all round, really. I'm disappointed that we can't be as progressive given what our aims are as a council. I don't know how everyone else feels.
I agree with you, Chris.
Yeah.
Can I ask them, most of your sites are going to be for more than 10 units or larger than half a hectare?
There's some larger than 10 units. Equally, there's a fair number who, yes, there's a fair proportion are bigger than 10
So
units.
most of those are going to trigger then the national requirement for a percentage for affordable housing.
Yeah. Okay. So Hannah, I take what you're saying, and you know, it is disappointing, but if that's the way it is, that's the way it is. Could we then focus? So in other words, if the percentage is going to be determined by what's in the local plan, and frankly we can't change it, to go back to Harold's point, can we then change the definition of what affordable is? So if they say it has to be X percent affordable, can we say, okay, so our definition of affordable is this? And actually what you were describing, I think makes a lot of sense, because I think simply selling houses off cheaper once and then essentially someone tends to profit from it and then it's no longer affordable after one sale doesn't make any sense to me. And equally, and I don't know, but I would imagine affordable rent is in as much demand as affordable to buy, if not more so. Can we influence those elements of it?
Just having a look to see. think in Fab4, where we include most of those different elements, we should say what type of affordable homes, because at the moment what we're saying is affordable homes should be an integral part of the development.
Yeah.
Whereas what you're saying is, and you want to say out of that definition, what are the types of affordable home that we need?
Correct. Yeah.
So it's about adding another point. So I'm just going to make a note in here.
John, could I just add to that?
Yeah.
For reasons to do with our ongoing row with Swale, I looked at the July MPPF, the most recent one, and that actually has really useful language in there for us about locally affordable and housing for local people. I wonder, Hannah, if we couldn't pick up some of that from the MPPF to strengthen our case.
Yeah, so we have with the what they call the first home. So that will be set with what is the income at that time for first homes. What's that entry level?
The MPPF is broader than that now. I was really surprised how helpful it is to us. Let's not pursue it now, but maybe we could just look at that, Hannah, offline, because that might be helpful to get a reference to the central government policy.
Could I, Chris, I think that might be your old left hand on screen, is it?
Yep, sorry it is, yep, sorry.
I think this is really critically important. I wonder whether, Harold, and it sounds like you've volunteered, maybe if you could work with Hannah to come back with some recommendations about.
Absolutely, I'd be delighted to, John. It's becoming a really big issue for me and for the Community Land Trust.
Yeah.
Let me just be really clear, not with the neighbourhood plan, but with Swale.
Yeah, and actually, you know, bearing that we can only do what we can do, I think getting this definition right could be as important of whether it's 25% or 30%, you know, because 30% of affordable housing, which isn't actually affordable housing, is kind of meaningless in any case. So it could make a big difference.
If everybody's happy, I'd be very happy to do that with Hannah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So Adrian, I'll take that as an action then. I've written it in. So Fab4, I'll set up a meeting, and Harold, what I'll do is I'll ask Dave to come as well.
Sure.
And we can type it together to make sure. So when we finish the call, we've got the draft policy, and then we can circulate it to everybody, can't we?
Yeah, and I'll send you the bits I found in the MPPF in case it's available.
Yeah. So I'll arrange that meeting. Harold, I'll drop you a line. We'll find a time when I can see Dave's diary, and Adrian, I'll take that as an action, and it's related to Fab4 policy.
Great. Just to go back to the minutes of the meeting, like I said, there were a number of recommendations, and to kind of summarize the recommendations were to put forward our various work elements to Swale. So to cut to the chase, essentially that was agreed at a town council meeting. So we have sent a variety of documents to Swale. Now, as we made clear at the meeting, this is kind of an informal step we've decided to take, mainly because, like Hannah said, we want to make sure we're in general conformity to the thinking there. We want to make sure there's no kind of you know, banana skins that we're going to slip on as we move further down it. So we've shared a variety of reports with them on the understanding that they're draft and they could change, and the policy document being one of them. So what we did is we shared the ACOM, so that's another small typo in number 5, ACOM and ACON.
Maybe appropriate.
Tends to be Freudian, but yeah, the ACOM site options and assessment report. So we've been back in touch with ACOM. They're going to make a few minor changes to it. They've sent it to locality, and then once locality have fed back, that project's essentially closed or will be closed off. But we sent it to Swale for their information. The other thing.
Sorry to be difficult, but could you just clarify what it means? It's gone to Swale.
Yeah.
To Swill, as I prefer to call it. Are they going to reply in writing with something which they will then stick by? I ask because they've just changed their view on Abbey Fields. And you begin to wonder whether that department is capable of saying something and then sticking by it. We need to be really clear about what the outcome of this consultation
So it's a really good point, Harold. And the honest truth is, at the moment, we haven't made clear to them what our expectations are. We've probably taken informality to too informal a step. I did send a chaser email saying, can you please make sure that this was specifically with respect to site allocation. I said, can you please make sure that your department is aligned to this, including the head of planning, James Freeman, so he doesn't come back at a later date and say he disagrees with it. But it's a fair point, and we should probably, obviously, you know, it's an informal review, can't hold them to it, but we should expect some degree of written feedback that indicates what they know is no problems, and if there are any areas they think may be contentious, to highlight them to us at this stage.
Hannah, do you have any experience of other authorities in this?
We're very progressive in sending them the document. Most groups don't send that evidence base because it's something independent.
Yeah.
What we would then do is, when we come to our consultation on our things, that's when we need them to give their formal written response and say, that's great because we'd taken that one through selection, but we didn't take it forward anymore because it was too small for us. So we support that one, or, you know, that's when we need that, because that's when we can actually hold them to it as well, because they've said it in a consultation period.
Yeah. So Hannah, are you suggesting at this stage we can't really...
I wouldn't worry whatever comes back. It's helpful information, but you don't have to do anything with it.
Yeah.
And really, it's more about, I'm interested in Jill's comments on the policies, so that we can just tweak the wording so that that's all right. I'd be more interested to see what they say at the full consultation period, because that's when it starts to count.
Yeah. And just to be clear, Hannah, we did share the ACOM site assessments and the design codes, but
great, and that's really good in the sharing spirit.
The sharing thing.
Their comments, don't worry about what comes back from
No, and you know, the whole point of things like the ACOM report is it's independent, right? We're not supposed
that's great, and it's great that you've been so open with the evidence base. You know, that can only serve to help them.
Yeah.
God, I think Jeff is trying to get in.
Sorry, Jeff, I apologize, I can't see everyone. Jeff.
Oh, okay. What I was going to say, bearing in mind the comments we were talking about with Harold, saying that with updates that have gone on with MPPF, and we're talking about the old bearing fruits local plan, what's the significance of our document if it is more aligned with the NPPF? Does that influence Swale and what they put in, because we're complying with national guidance, and so they would be inclined perhaps to reflect what the Faversham end of the borough would like to see included in the local plan?
I mean, Jeff, they're going to have to update anyway because the MPPF came in the summer. So by the time they get to those later stages, they'll have to make that reflection. They'll have to update their document. What we're able to do, because we're going to accelerate ahead of the emerging local plan, is we're going to bridge the gap in between the two documents.
And that's the point I'm looking to reinforce, because if we are ahead of the game in that respect, that we've updated our document in line with national guidelines, that we would be hopefully encouraging them to do the same for our area.
And in our rationale to our policies, we're quoting their emerging local plan.
Yeah.
So we're recognising that this is the direction of travel.
Yeah.
So we're always looking forward. It's just that technically, when it comes to meeting the basic conditions, we're on the adopted local plan, but the examiner will be looking to see how we are avoiding disparities with the emerging local plan.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, John.
I think the timing is interesting as well, Jeff, because if they stick to their planned timelines, they'll be submitting for inspection in May. So you know, that whatever the new emerging plan is, if it changes from the old emerging plan, we should have a pretty good insight into what it's saying and where it's
Yeah,
going.
good.
So just, so we sent the draft policies. We also sent the recommended green spaces, which have been through public consultation.
John, sorry, what happened to Wallace Road?
Wallace Road is recommended as a green space currently.
I would like to add then another agenda item under AOB to talk about what the Community Land Trust is going to do next, John, in the sense of wanting to be open and transparent.
Okay, no problem. The design code and the site allocations. We'll talk about, we've actually got a session towards the end of this evening's meeting to talk about the site allocation. I think we're going to do it in private session, if I'm correct. Reason being, we haven't interacted with any of the landowners or site promoters on it. So until such time as we're ready to go to public consultation, which hopefully will be in the next month or ish, we're going to do it in private session because of the sensitivities around it. Just one thing I want to come back on this because it was something that's talked to Urban Vision about. Now we've got Hannah, we can discuss it. Yeah, and this was something I read, so I suppose I can speak to it. One of the policies that we have got in there, Hannah, is on critical road junctions. So it's 5.6.
Yeah.
Currently, so it's as it reads, for development, the impacts on junctions with identified safety capacity issues scheme will only be supported where there's no severe impact, taking into account any mitigations. The question I had really is, firstly, we haven't identified those critical junctions, but I think it's quite doable, you know. So we've got the A251, A2, we've got Brimley Corner, etc., etc. The question I had is, what teeth would this policy realistically have within the neighbourhood plan? And I'll use a big example. A big example is Brimley Corner. And what was clear from the Reg 19 feedback that Swell got on their local plan is Highways England have identified Brimley Corner as having significant capacity issues, blah, blah, blah. If we put it in here and say, well, you know, as well documented, Brimley Corner has severe capacity issues, etc., etc. Therefore, any development around Brimley Corner should not proceed unless it has mitigations. Would that have teeth? Is it worth including it, or should this be something that's left to a strategic level?
A really good question, John. And it does, in the sense that when you're building your argument for a site, either pro and you want to support it. So let's say we've got a long straight road and there's a T-junction at the end. You build the first block and there's no impact on that junction. I can build another 50 houses behind and it starts to have an impact because now your traffic and my traffic are now increasing on that. Then Harold comes along and he's building a development the same size as I did. So that's another 50. So that's say 150 homes coming out onto that T-junction, and suddenly the capacity for that is significant enough that it now needs somebody to pay to make that a roundabout or with traffic lights. But Harold says, I'm only 50 houses, it's only another 100, 200 cars, whatever it is. So they let Harold off. Chris is the last in the development, poor Chris. Chris is doing 50 last houses at the end, and they say, no, that's it. Chris, you totally have blown it for that T-junction. So Chris, now you have to pay to make that junction better for all those other developers that have been along the line, because it's about that incremental change. If you think that's going to happen in a location, because then Chris just goes, well, actually, it doesn't stack up, it's not viable, and goes, then the problem hasn't been resolved. And all those other people that could have all contributed to it in those small bits will have missed out on that. So if you've got a situation where you've got a junction that you know is at capacity now or will be in the foreseeable future, and then you've got lots of incremental development coming, that could have a big impact. Whereas I would say if it's a junction like that one and the Highways England have picked up on it, then that means that's going to come up on the national agenda. And that's something you, instead of including a policy, you just reiterate their comments as a town council on that application and say, and we know this to be the case because it's evident from within our community, and we would welcome mitigation measures to deal with that. The reason why I say that is because we have seen local plan, neighbourhood plans that have had a strong policy like this, but it's still got knocked back at a county level because they said, oh, well, we could only go so far with those mitigation works. So
Well,
it's
if
not going to solve everything, and you have to have a lot of evidence. You have to have a technical report to back up when those junctions are going to be at capacity and what is the likely increase that they could take.
John, I have a slightly different concern, which is that I fear, particularly the South East Faversham developments being raided by national government to pay for Brenley Corner. And I think we need to be careful about opening up a Trojan horse for that within the neighbourhood plan. I think we should basically be saying...
I'd welcome opening up a Trojan horse for that with the neighbourhood plan.
Because?
Because somebody's got to sort that junction out.
But it's a national junction, Chris.
You're absolutely right. But Highways England and KCC shrug their shoulders and say it's got to be the developer that's going to have to put forward for that. Why should we sit by and let them both shrug their shoulders and all those developments go ahead? I just at the moment, I think we have to force that issue.
And that policy would do that, Chris. It would make them, it's a grounds for refusal if they fail to mitigate appropriately. Now, what you could do to speed things up is you could just put that one junction in there because you have that supporting evidence already out there in the public domain.
John, can I raise the points that I've already expressed and asked questions about Brenley Roundabout? Because we're talking about section 106 coming from the development that's proposed in South East Faversham. But the cost of that Brenley scheme is really significant in capital terms. And really, I've asked the question about who's actually going to pay for it, not all our section 106. And I've had a response back that Canterbury, who are likely to benefit it from, and Dover that are likely to benefit from improvements of that junction, could be contributing as well to the upgrade of Brenley Roundabout, because I'm as concerned as Harold is that section 106 for our new developments is only going to go so far. If it's all gone towards a major capital highway scheme, and bearing in mind we've got the second Dartford crossing coming down as well, those schemes ought to be contributing to the improvement of the M2 and the M2 corridor going to Dover and to the A2. So really, I think that we've got to be careful how we work this through so that we don't imply acceptance to our section 106 being cleaned off for Brenley Roundabout, or solely our section 106.
Yeah, Chris.
I'm slightly nervous here that we are trying to fight two considerations with one neighbourhood plan, and frankly, the majority of the conversation we're having is about a development that sits predominantly outside of the boundaries of the neighbourhood plan and therefore, frankly, not relevant. My biggest concern for Faversham as a resident, not just a councillor, but as a resident, is that given Highways England and KCC's response to the local plan, I don't think they have much, if any, care for, let alone budget or planning, for any major development at Brenley. And when I asked that question to be raised with the Duchy last week or the week before, the Duchy's response was, well, actually, we're going to change the nature of transport and frankly, we're going to drip build this and something will happen before then. So it's like the opposite of a Mexican standoff at the moment. There are no guns drawn. There's just a bunch of bloody shrugged shoulders. And what we end up with is a whole bunch of development in Faversham that nobody's taking responsibility for the impacts of highways on. And I think the very least we can do is try and draw a gun in that Mexican standoff. And that's about the best thing we can do.
John, can I ask Anthony, is this coming up at County Hall at all?
Not particularly. I mean, County Hall is quite different to other councils in the way it works. This would be considered a local issue, not a county-wide issue, at least so far as political debate is concerned. I mean, I imagine to some extent that the Highways Department, well, no, not some, they definitely will have it on their radar. They definitely consider Brenley Corner a problem. There's no KCC money available, as far as I know, to do anything about it, because their budget is being cut by tens of millions every year and has been for the last 4+ years. I mean, it seems to be where we're at is that everyone agrees something that must be done, and there's a burden on Highways England because it's a national roundabout on a motorway, but also we wouldn't mind if developers contribute to that. The district councils probably don't, whether it's Swale or the other district councils in Kent, don't have much they can contribute in terms of cash. So it seems to me it's a tactical question. Does it make it more likely or less likely that we get something done with this roundabout by mentioning it in our neighbourhood plan? And it feels like it might be odd not to mention such a major problem in our neighbourhood plan.
Yeah, I think, sorry to use a terrible pun here, but I think it would put a speed bump in the discussions, because I think, as Hannah said, unless we have our own super evidenced mobility and transport studies, it's likely that it could be dismissed. But I think, to use Chris's analogy, we've raised it, so it's a discussion point. The very fact that, so for instance, and we can talk about Brenley Corner, but you take away Brenley Corner because it's such a big one. Love Lane, A2 junction already, terrible, really hard to get out of. If we put that as a critical junction, for instance, to my mind, it means at least we have the conversation as a town council in the future with developers around the junction. So it raises the issue. Whether it means that ultimately we'll get it sorted is probably another question. But yeah, I think because my initial thinking was, well, if we're not going to do something with it, let's not bother. But actually, to your point, Anthony, I think these are big issues in Faversham. And if we look at the current A251 junction upgrade, it's clear that it impacts a lot of people. It's a big issue and a big deal, and we should probably include these junctions.
If you look at the LC, what that's coming up with, a lot of the evidence base will be within that document.
Yeah.
So you'll be able to draw those things out of there. But like you say, if you include those junctions, it gives you that ability to respond on that application and say, yay or nay to this, because it's helping to solve our woes, or it's just going to exacerbate a situation.
Yeah. Can I reveal my ignorance and ask you what might be a stupid question, John? The Section 106 monies for most of South East Faversham are not going to come to Faversham anyway, because it's not in our parish.
Probably.
Is that correct?
I don't know the answer to that.
Hannah.
Hannah's got her hand up. Hopefully, Hannah P has some ideas.
I don't know the answer to that question. I had my hand up for another question. Sorry.
Hannah Bartlett, do you know the answer to that question?
I'm afraid I'll have to pass on that specialist subject area, Harold.
I
think we need to find out, don't we? Because that might make quite a big difference.
I think I do know the answer to that question, and I think you're right. At the moment, it should go proportionally to the wards in which the development takes place.
That's what
we have asked, as you well know, but I don't know where that's sitting, for the boundaries of Faversham to be examined as a consequence of these developments. So we need to get an answer to that question as well.
I think we need to explore this because it could make quite a big difference when it comes to the campaign for get people to back this. That could be quite an important part of the argument, I think, John.
Yeah. You're right, Harold. And just to pick up on one point, I think we have a meeting arranged now with the group who are working on the LC Whip, because despite being able to say LC Whip, I've still got very little insight into what it is and how it's shaping up. So I think that'll be useful. One thing, and this is my personal concern, is when this was discussed at the last council meeting, the LC Whip team were talking a lot about the Section 106 and how it was going to feed the LC Whip. But of course, as a neighbourhood plan, we've got priorities and interests which extend beyond transport. It's not the only thing we should be spending Section 106 money on. So I think it's a good conversation. Hannah, you've been waiting for a while. Sorry, what was your...
Thank you. I don't know whether it's even possible, but I feel like the improvements to Brindley Corner are an important factor in like multiple local plans that are coming forward at the moment. So it definitely impacts Canterbury, it definitely impacts Dover. I'd be surprised if it didn't impact other local plans as well. So is there any mileage in discussing with those other authorities, the local planning authorities, about what they're doing to look into that as an issue, just to have a more kind of collaborative idea of how other local authorities are going to tackle that as well?
Hannah, the great opportunity that you have is the town council at the moment are a plan making authority, a plan making body. So you're not just the town council. So you can ask them to share the evidence base for those and say, listen, the problem physically sits within our neighbourhood area, but this is clearly going to have a wider impact. And then I can then reference whatever your discussions are, I can update that into the rationale for that section in the neighbourhood plan. So it puts it there in the document as well.
Sorry.
Chris?
I know this is not the topic of conversation, but I do think it's something we need to talk about, either this steering group or the next. But I think since we've collectively met as a group, as a whole group together, we've had the really significant issue of the local plan being knocked back and having to do Reg 18 and Reg 19 again. You know, when we were on a different timeline, it felt as it transpired that significant development around Faversham was a fait accompli. And therefore it felt that we were in some senses bound to recognise that and to deal with it as a positive outcome. I think at the moment, actually I think two things. One of the things, we don't have to accept it as much as we once did or wanted to. I think it will still come to pass, interestingly, but nevertheless. But I genuinely think the inputs of Highways England and KCC are really, really significant. And I think, you know, collectively, we need to get our head around what that means. The reason I'm talking about this, Howard, is to your point about communicating what the plan means and what it needs and how we try and get the neighbourhood plan accepted. What the neighbourhood plan isn't trying to accept is 3,500 houses around it. And it never was and never should be. And we just need to draw those distinct lines, I think. And I think we need a conversation about what we personally feel, and perhaps that's a different conversation at a different time about what that makes us feel about the neighbourhood plan.
Harold?
Quickly follow up at Chris's point on that. I think, Chris, that we should have that conversation. I haven't had chance to look at the new consultation process, but I think I do worry about the timetable which is now proposed. It's very close to the next set of elections. It won't take much to push that policy past the next set of elections. And the council may be of a very different constituency by then. And I think we do need to rethink entirely our view about development in South East Faversham in the context of what looked like major shifts in policy being driven by officers.
Yeah. So just on that, I think it's a really good really good discussion point. Just to be a pedant, because item 5 is a discussion on local plan review. Can we just finish off the minute,
Sure.
and then we can discuss it?
Sounds
So
good, yeah.
I think it was really useful discussion, and I think we've certainly got. I think we've all agreed that pushing on with the critical junction is really important, and the affordable housing, which Harold and Hannah will take offline and come back with some recommendations. Can I just recommend that we accept the minutes of the last meeting if there's no other comments on it?
I'm happy to second.
Great, super. Anyone not accept? Great. Okay, thank you. So item number 5 is the Swale local plan, and
Can I
actually,
just ask, is there an action for the critical junction, John?
yes, I think we just need to put them forward and
To include them, so,
include them. Yeah,
yeah, okay.
I'm happy
But just
to.
on that, could I ask that we include the junction by the library? Because
Yeah.
that is horrendous. It's absolutely in the middle of the parish, that whole route down through Key Lane as well. You know, it isn't just the ones outside the town, there are some within the town which have more serious health effects to some extent.
Yeah, that's East Street, Newton Road, and
And then back into Key Lane, frankly. I mean, it goes all the way back there.
yes, it's terrible. It's terrible living in Ospringe Road. You know,
Yeah.
you get down the South Road and they're queuing. Cars queuing.
Yeah.
Can I suggest that if you've got someone, put them forward and then we can review them next time, what those junctions are. So item 5, in terms of the local plan review. So I suggested we put this on the agenda, but actually I did it before I'd actually read it, and Chris is absolutely right. The proposal isn't for a new Reg 19, it's actually to go back to Reg 18, then conduct a Reg 19. I just had a look at that today. I don't think we'll resolve it to this evening, but I just wanted to share the dates with you so we're all kind of on the same page with it. So it was discussed this month at the local plan panel. I think it was on the 7th of October. There is a new Reg 18 document. I shared it just before the meeting. There are 3 options which are proposed. I haven't, again, I only read through them extremely quickly. The idea is that, and it's not clear to me, but that Reg 18, when it actually starts, has it started?
Starts on the 29th, John, and finishes on the 29th.
Yep.
Okay, so the 29th to the 29th. And then the plan is to have a Reg 19 in February of next year, and then submission in May, and potential adoption in February 2023. So that's the timelines. Just to we've already obviously started this discussion, but I suppose the big question is, and I think I know what the answer is, given that, and I support what Chris said. I think that when we started this, the emerging local plan was had emerged, was well understood. It became clear quite quickly that Swale had a preferred option that they were keen to pursue. And to Chris's point, the neighbourhood plan therefore was relatively silent on the local plan, in the sense that it was, and I can only speak personally on this, it felt like a fait accompli in terms of what the option that was going to be accepted, and consequently it was for me about, well, actually trying to make the best of what's in front of you. But arguably we now have the option to take a stronger position on it, and I open it to the floor what people's thoughts are on that. Should be getting involved or take a position?
I was just going to say, you can do, because you've got all your evidence base. So you've got your housing needs assessment, you've got your site selection documents, you've got your design codes. So you know what your level of growth separate to the strategic allocations would be for your settlement. And so you can use that and make really strong representations going forward and saying, thinking about our resilient community, this is actually the level of growth that's required. And to be anything different to that, it's going to need, you're building basically a new settlement with that extension, and it needs its associated infrastructure. And then these key things can't be elastoplast fits. There has to be a fundamental to address those, to make those happen. And then you put that back to them, like if they came back to us, so you give them the evidence and you say, this is the statement of fact. So anything different from that is going to need a lot of reworking. So I would say you've worked really hard to gather all that evidence base. Absolutely. And groups do that very effectively and have made changes in their growth strategies as a result of that, because it's not just the local authority that are considering that, but it's the examiner. So that's why you quote those relevant sections out of it. So don't worry if you think, oh, Swale didn't really reflect that, because the examiner is also looking at that.
Okay, so just to paraphrase then, we're in a much stronger position given the work we've done to put forward strong representations.
Absolutely, yeah, you can actually have a strong impact on that now.
And Hannah, actually, you've made what, if I've understood you correctly, it's an important point which I hadn't fully appreciated or appreciated as much as I should, which is that if we express a view in our neighbourhood plan about too much housing development around Faversham, even if we're not successful in persuading Swale Borough Council in the formulation of its local plan, we may persuade the planning inspector to whom that plan is appealed.
Yes, so if you say County Council and Highways England make this comment here, this is where the highest level of growth is. These are all the different things. There'll be stuff out of the LC whip saying you can't travel in this direction because it's just not going to be sustainable longer term. All those elements come back and then you use that as your fighting argument.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely. I just wanted to ask, is there anything key that you still wanted to ask me this time? It's just I can hear somebody screaming for a bath in the background. The great unwashed Hannah, I'm hoping that I don't end up with water everywhere, but or someone needs a dunk in the bath.
Thank you, Hannah. That's been extremely useful, and I think what you've just left us with is
Yeah.
great.
Very good.
Yeah. You can do, you have the power to change it, and that is now, definitely, because they're so early.
Yeah. Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you.
Night all.
Good night. Thanks, Hannah.
John, if I may.
Yeah.
I don't particularly want to discuss this in this forum, but I just wanted to make a couple of points. One is that February 2023 is incredibly close to the next election in May 2023. And moving to the committee systems will substantially reduce the power of the current cabinet members, which I suspect will empower the officers. And it may well be that the whole of the thrust of the previous local plan actually gets changed. And I think, therefore, it's really important that we push on with the neighbourhood plan for Faversham, and that the Faversham Town Council, the Faversham Society, everybody else is free to make their own comments on the housing beyond the boundaries of the parish. But somehow we need to make sure that the public in Faversham, our fellow residents and citizens, understand that we are only talking about development within the parish boundary.
Yeah, I think that's really important, Harold. The only thing I'd say,
Harold, I'm struggling for the relevance of that to point 5. Point 5 on the agenda is wholly and solely about the local plan. So I think you're right. We've always been in agreement as a steering group, as a council, that we know what we want for the neighbourhood plan. We know what we want for that physical geographic entity, and we're developing that, and that's really strong. And we persuade that of the local people. This point on point 5 though is very specific. It's about what we do in the context of the new regulation 19 and 18 for Faversham Town Council. And I think even using the vehicle of the neighbourhood plan, we have to be saying, as I've said 3 times and Hannah's just reiterated, that the evidence entirely suggests that Faversham cannot support that weight of development without significant infrastructure development. And I think we have to be very loud and clear on that.
Chris, I don't disagree with any of that. I completely agree with you. My point was, I think, for example, the Faversham Society is likely to come out even more strongly. But what worries me, and the reason I wanted to bring it up, is that if you think back to the exhibitions, it's always been a problem to help people to understand the difference between the local plan and the neighbourhood plan. And there's still a big effort required there, I think.
Yeah,
That's the reason I was raising it.
Harold, though, I think by the very fact that we're willing to discuss the local plan and take a position on it does differentiate us, because what we're saying is, well, we're different and actually we have a view on the local plan.
Yeah.
And ultimately, much of this stuff will probably, and I think Anthony touched it, it'll probably happen anywhere, could happen anywhere. But it does feel, and I'm emboldened by what Hannah said, I think it's right for us to say, this is what the town needs, and this is what we would like to see. If you wish to do anything beyond what we think is necessary, because frankly, you know, the housing needs assessment is clear in terms of what the town needs, and what we have been asked to consider in the last emerging plan was way in excess of what the town actually needs. And is to simply say, if you're going to do anything different, you're going to have to really up your game. And the expectation is you deliver on the infrastructure, you deliver. And unless those things are in place, then we only want what we need. I think that's a fair position to take. And actually, dare I say, it's not about being popular, but probably a popular position to take as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's in a sense, there's no disbenefit from doing it. Because I think, John, your point, if I've understood it correctly, is if we put this argument in that our weight of evidence says no to so many thousand houses in Faversham, even if we're not successful in stopping so many thousand houses, it may force them to provide us more infrastructure. And to be really frank about it, the forces within Swale who want to push housing here rather than Sittingbourne or other places will have a harder job to do that with our weight of evidence that we've got, that we can put in.
Yeah.
The only thing that is on my mind is, I mean, I think the community view is more mixed. It's not black and white. You know, you get a lot of people in Faversham who want not one house, which we all know is a bit unrealistic. And then some people want a bit, and some people who want a bit more. And there definitely is an issue with the younger generation, the under 40s, people who don't own their own place and are kind of being ripped off, paying rents and so on. And I just wonder whether, when we have our referendum, I don't know if this is possible or not, whether it has to be a simple yes, no, which is what they usually are, or whether there's a potential for option A and B, because I can see a risk that actually some of the under 40s, if we draft the neighbourhood plan to be quite against, or it's felt to be against housing, actually some of the younger people will come along and vote no in protest because they want a place to live.
It's not that at all, and I don't think we're saying that. I mean, the neighbourhood plan being what it is, given we're given an allocation, we have to allocate 200 houses. It's part of what we discussed last week. It's inevitable. All I think we're saying is crafting the neighbourhood plan to say, if you put substantial amounts and volumes of houses around, please ensure that the infrastructure is there to support them. And I think just that phrasing allows us to add weight to arguments against the local plan, or getting somebody to make a decision on ownership around infrastructure, which is really what we want.
And dare I say, back on affordable housing, you know, because what the housing needs assessment, and I'll get the figure wrong, but it said we need, is it 1,000 or 1,400 affordable houses? You know, we go back and say we need 1,500 affordable houses. So if you're going to give us 3,500 houses, 1,500 of them must be affordable, because that's what we need.
Not the 80% definition.
Yeah. You know, and we can add the detail of that, but I think that's the position. You know, we're saying this is what we need. We've got evidence to indicate what their needs and requirements are. you know, if you want to take it, you got to deliver against our needs. I think this is in order to do this properly and actually to come to some conclusions about how we approach this, we probably need a separate meeting. But I think we're all agreed there's sufficient value in us getting engaged with the Reg 19, or sorry, Reg 18, and the clock's ticking on it.
Do you want to do that as this group or as the town council? Because I did ask for the town council and only you replied for John to see if we wanted a separate meeting set up with Swan and a separate meeting to discuss.
Sorry, Adrian, I didn't see that. Apologies.
Right, should I resend that to everyone tomorrow? Do you think that'd be a helpful way to start?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, ultimately, I think if
I mean, Jules confirmed they are willing to do a meeting.
Yeah,
but we haven't got long, so I'll re-forward my email.
Yeah, and actually, if you know the town council isn't high on their agenda, you know, maybe it's our role to put it on the agenda, and at least we can debate it.
Can I ask a question, please?
Sure.
So I fully support what you're saying. My concern with it is that there are multiple partners that provide infrastructure. So KCC on schooling, the CCG with health practices and things like that, that will only put those infrastructure projects in place with X amount of new residents. How do we square that as a group? For example, if you've got, you know, if we're saying we need 1,500 affordable houses, if you're going to build 3,000, well, what if the new school threshold is quite a lot higher than that, or what if the new CCG threshold is quite a lot higher than that? How do we square that all off? Because at the moment, the CCG is saying that there's no need for extra. There's no need for extra GP places because there's going to be an extension to Newton Place. But actually, you know, a lot of the residents are saying that that's not true, and we do need greater GP provision. So I just think there's lots of other parties involved, isn't there, and in their kind of opinions on things.
Hannah, can I just answer specifically on the infrastructure need? The point that's made strongly in the housing needs assessment is that these are people currently living in Faversham, currently using the schools, currently using the health centre. It's not new population, they're here already.
Yeah.
You know, so in that sense, the point doesn't apply. It's the new houses which are being occupied by incomers who require extra infrastructure.
Chris.
I think you make a good point, Hannah, but I think the incremental volume by incremental housing would generate that need. And I do get your point about proportionality and therefore the value of 106. I think we should use this new window to reiterate our view from our consultations about doctor surgeries and practices. I think we'll end up in the same position again, which is Swale saying it's not us, Gov, it's the clinical commissioning group, whatever it's CCG. You know, but I think we have more evidence and a greater weight of opinion now, don't we? So reiterating that, irrespective of the proportion of housing we should do at this new window.
Yeah.
I think you raise a really, really good point, Hannah. I think, and I'm going to say something which is deeply unhelpful, but in a sense, I think our role in this is essentially a largely voluntary part-time parish neighbourhood planning group, is to raise the issues, not necessarily
the solutions. Yeah, sure.
That's for others to think about, because
Yeah.
that's what they're paid for, right?
Sure.
But it's a good point. Okay, can I suggest just that we do we want to discuss this further, or should we maybe perhaps have a separate meeting to discuss it? What would you like to do? I'm just aware of the time.
I'd like there to be a separate meeting, but I would like to be part of it.
Yeah, I would as well. I think most of us would. Could we have an extraordinary neighbourhood planning meeting on this, Adrian? So just out of the regular monthly meetings, maybe we have a meeting in the next couple of weeks, if that would suit everyone.
Okay, I shall canvass, but I'll still send my email to the whole town council though.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you know, maybe it extends into a meeting with, you know, as this working group is anyway, any councillor can attend it, you know, and maybe, you know, we can certainly lead on it in terms of.
Yeah, but full council will be making a recommendation.
Exactly, and can of course attend the meeting to discuss.
Okay.
How long do you think we'll need? I mean, we could, roughly 2 weeks from now is the full town council. Is it worth tacking it to that meeting, or do we need more time than was like to be available? Or is it better for other reasons to separate it?
I think separate it, because
Yeah, okay.
I don't think it needs to be necessarily in the public domain like the Faversham Town Council meetings.
I think it might be worth having a view, because ultimately I think it's the town council that's got to respond to Reg 18, Reg 19, isn't it? It's not the steering group. I do think the steering group should have an opinion that it potentially discusses with the town council. And so it would strike me that we would be wise to have got our shit together and have a view that we recommend to the town council as a strategy for our response.
That'd be good. Mhm, definitely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Okay, Adrian, could you see if you can find a date, please?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so we've got, I think, 3 other agenda items to touch on. This one, I hopefully is relatively quick. It's the new zero carbon toolkit. I don't know if anyone had a chance to have a look at it. If not, we could again defer it to another meeting. But essentially, just very briefly, it's a toolkit that was shared. I can't even remember where it came from now. I think it was one of our fellow councillors forwarded it to us. It's come from West Oxfordshire, Cotswolds and Forest of Dean District Council, supported with some professional bodies. It's a very useful document around building for net zero, and essentially what the proposal would be to include it as one of the appendices within the neighbourhood plan. So obviously it wouldn't necessarily carry any planning weight, but we could refer to it within the policies and ask people to take it into consideration. I don't know whether you want to discuss it now. Maybe it's not urgent. We can push it to another meeting if you like. You haven't had a chance to read it.
John, I struggle to find any reason why we wouldn't want to endorse this. I mean, in the absence of national policy on this, and they still haven't brought it out, I think it would, well, if I was a town councillor, I'd be wanting to announce this as COP26 opened on October the 1st. Sorry, November the 1st.
Yeah.
But it's just a great opportunity to say we're doing something.
Okay.
You've got that SDGs thing coming up. Frankly, I think we should, and the town council should make something of it.
Mm.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. Hannah?
Right.
Thanks. Yeah, I was just going to pretty much echo what Harold said. I think that one of the kind of key performance indicators was that is like being ambitious and out there as a council. So I think we should absolutely go for it and make a big noise about it too.
Okay, super. So can Harold, Hannah propose that we include it. I'd second that. We'll take it forward to town council and indicate that we wish to include it within the neighbourhood plan as an appendices and refer to it.
And then try and get the town council to put a press release out and get it out there during COP26. Yeah. We'll all be desperate for some good news.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
What's the recommendation?
Yeah.
Yeah, propose, that's the word.
I second. I propose.
Hannah Perkins
Actually,
and John Owen.
Yeah.
I was going to say, please don't put me down as the proposer. I'll be in all kinds of trouble.
Yeah. Okay, great. Chris.
I was voting to approve.
Oh,
Yeah. I don't-
I think, yeah.
I'm abstaining.
Absolutely.
Okay, super. Well, that was relatively painless. Faversham mood boards. Just we need to go through this very quickly. Let me find it. So in addition to developing or writing up the actual neighbourhood plan itself, Urban Vision are going to get it typeset. So they're going to work with a graphic designer to design the actual document itself. They've sent us, and unfortunately Hannah's left us, but have sent us this mood board and color palette. I'm not quite sure what we're supposed to do with it, whether we can approve it. But I don't know if there's any comments on it. My comment was there's an awful lot of colors here for a color palette, but I don't know whether there's any got more sensible views on it. Chris?
I quite like it, but I think once you pass matters of creativity onto me, we're all in trouble. So I'm not the best judge, really.
I'm not commenting for exactly the same reason, Chris.
Okay. Can I suggest, if anyone has a keen interest in design and color palettes and mood boards, that we frankly, I've got no problem with it at all. But if at a later stage anyone wishes to get further involved in the design of the document, please feel free to put your hand up. So has anyone got any objections to what's been proposed? I suppose a better question.
No.
Okay, great. So Adrian, would you mind taking a note just to get back to Hannah and Urban Vision, tell them that we're happy to proceed with the color palette as suggested.
Okay.
Great. Right. The last thing on the agenda for this evening is a discussion around the public consultation on the site allocation. I think, as I mentioned at the start, there are a number of elements associated with this, not least the sites themselves, which mean that it would be more appropriate to conduct this in private session. Before we do that, is there any, Harold, you mentioned an AOB, does it fit into the site allocation?
I think it probably is best discussed there.
Okay, great. And
I have a tiny AOB, but we'll do that later, right?
unless you want to do it now, before we end up.
So Harold briefly mentioned it. We're hoping to run we are running an exhibition around sustainable development goals in the first week of November, and we were hoping that representatives from the group would want to do a small display around things of your choosing, really, to do with our local work and how it supports the sustainable development goals, which I can send round to everybody. But if anyone is willing to do that, that would be really great.
Anna, can I just say it's one of the worst weeks of the year for me, and I'm going to have to bow out. I apologise, but I really don't have any time.
That's okay. But we can talk about that offline, right? I'll email out.
I do think that the decision you've just taken on the carbon tool should absolutely be there.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, I'll stop the recording now then.
Okay, super.